My name is Alfons van der Kraan. I am the author of Lombok, Conquest, Colonization and Underdevelopment, which was published back in 1980 in English, and then about 10 or maybe 20 years later in Indonesian translation, for which I'm grateful to Doni Supandra for having provided the English translation. Now, it's a long time ago since I wrote this book on Lombok, and I have to say that I spent about a year in the Netherlands doing research on the history of Lombok. Most of these source materials, or I would say 95% of it, were in Dutch colonial, were records from the Dutch colonial archives. When I look back on this book, I cannot help but see the similarities between the history of Lombok and what is happening in the world today. In the world today, great powers, the United States first and foremost, use that power to impose their will upon less powerful countries. The same happened to Lombok in the 19th century. In the 19th century, Lombok was an independent kingdom in what is now Indonesia, in the eastern Indonesian archipelago. It had very little trade contacts with the outside world. But from about 1880 onwards, the Dutch became interested in extending their influence over Lombok. And the reason for that was essentially that the Dutch were worried that the British might establish themselves in Lombok and also in Bali. And so to forestall the British, the Dutch began to behave aggressively towards the Lombok kingdom. The Balinese ruler of the time, who came to power in the 1830s, was not unaware of the attempts by the Dutch to extend their influence over the island. But the Dutch began around 1880 to impose a naval blockade on the island, which made it impossible for the Lombok Raja to buy modern firearms in Singapore. He did, around 1890, he did try to establish regular contacts with Singapore with a view to buying repeating rifles and dynamite and other war materials. And to that end, he leased a couple of steamships with European crews and sent them to Singapore to buy weapons. And from the point of view of money, there was no problem, because the Raja of Lombok was a very wealthy ruler. He had enough money in his treasury chamber to equip a small army. But the naval blockade intercepted most of the shipments. And the parallel with the world today are obvious. The United States, when it seeks to expand its influence into a particular region of the world, always begins with imposing a naval blockade on that region. In the Middle East and so on, in other places where they seek to extend their power. So the dynamics of imperialism haven't changed. It is just that it has not, whereas Lombok was a regional conflict, What we have in the world today is global conflicts, but the dynamics of it, of the great and powerful extending their influence over weaker states, that has remained the same, much the same. Anyway, I'll leave it at this for now, and I will do another topic if you are interested. Thank you very much for your attention.